She's Katy Montgomery. He's Justin Joseph. These best friends are serving subpoenas to bad advice weekly with Wrong Way Forward. Now, here's Katy and Justin.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. I'm Justin Joseph here along with my best friend, Katy Montgomery. Joining us this week, we're doing something different that we haven't done before. So we're having a guest this week to talk about something that we really frequently talk about on this podcast, and that's kind of how to be the best version of yourself. So you'll see Jon Rosenberg joining us here. He's the author of this book here called A Guide to Thriving. You can get it at your local bookstore or on Amazon. You can see Katy and I have gone through it. I've tabbed it. We're ready for the discussion today. Jon has more than 2 decades of teaching and leading Fortune 500 executives. He lives in Toronto and holds advanced degrees from Cornell as well as the University of Penn. He's served leadership roles at Walmart, Procter & Gamble, and right now he's working as the CEO of StrongPoint Group and co-founder of Anther. And these are firms that are dedicated to helping people and organizations move from surviving to thriving. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Jon, why don't you give us quickly, sort of as a jumping off point, what is the difference and what is kind of the path from surviving to thriving? What are you talking about there?
So thank you for having me. So there's 2 things. Number one, I think let's define what survival mode and what thriving mode are, right? Because this is the binary that I set up in the book. And then the bridge between those 2 is agency, which we can also talk a little bit about. So Justin, Katy, let me maybe ask you a question. Have you ever felt like you're in survival mode?
It's very interesting that you asked that, because one of the things that I wrote down from your book is that the patterns that have kept us safe in the past keep us imprisoned. And so I would say I am currently in survival mode. And I was talking to a fellow coach this morning, and she said, I think that this week, basically this week of February is everyone's survival mode. It's like when winter is just getting to you, it's like there's still ice on the ground. It's like that crux of like, you haven't had the spring break vacation yet. Everything's coming at once. And you just feel like, you are in automatic mode and you just keep saying it's going to get better, but it might not. And so what I'm finding now is that I am losing my mind over just very small, inconsequential things. So I think it's pretty fair to say I would like to be thriving soon. And Jon, I'm going to put that burden on you.
I will say I am also in survival mode. I pulled over to yell at a garbage man the other day because he pulled out in front of me and just completely ignored me. And I felt the need to roll my window down and yell at him. So I realized at that point that there were issues going on. And Jon, just to kind of give you a big picture, I'm a realtor, and last year I had a really great first and second quarter. And the fourth quarter was the hardest quarter I've ever had. And it has sort of ruined me right now, my mental frame of mind. And so I am in survival mode. I was in thriving last year. I'm in survival mode now. I'm yelling at garbage people. So we both give you this. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing and for being, so open and vulnerable with your experience. And I think I've asked this question of hundreds of people, and except for 2 people, and I'm not going to talk about the outliers, everybody has said, oh my God, of course I have felt like I'm in survival mode. And it's this space where, our attention really narrows to hyper-focus on the things that we believe matter most. And we are tense and snappy and tired. And you know what? Survival mode is a really useful mode to be in. I grew up in Caracas, Venezuela, and it was a very dangerous city. By some standards, by some statistics, the year that I left Venezuela and moved to Toronto, there were 52,000 violent murders in the country. 52,000. So it's a war zone. So of course I want to be in survival mode, because if I take the wrong turn, I might die. So survival mode is very useful. And evolutionarily speaking, when we were in the savannah, and we heard rustle in the bushes, being in survival mode was very helpful. Now, the challenge is that today, most of our threats are psychological, not physical. Our actual lives are not at risk. And Justin, I'm not sure what your financial situation is, and of course it's really hard to have a difficult quarter. But the bigger question would be, what's really at risk here for you? Is it in my case? So I spent 2.5 decades in the corporate world, And I thought that the day I got fired, 2 weeks later, I was going to be living under a bridge, and I wasn't going to be able to pay my rent or my mortgage, and I wasn't going to be able to support my family, and I wasn't going to be able to and that jump from I may get fired to I'm no longer going to be able to survive happened. It wasn't even a conscious jump. It happened automatically. And our brain is designed for that. It's designed with that negativity bias in mind in order to save our lives and to protect us. Our brain is not designed to make us happy. It's not designed for us to be.
Tell me more about that. You don't think our brain's designed to make us happy?
No.
Well, if you look at the research, I think there's between 10 and 100 million stimuli around us every second. 10 and 100 million stimuli. Of those, I think by some researchers suggest that around 40 to 50 make it into our conscious awareness, and we actually pick up maybe less than 10. And of those 10, there's like a 5-to-1 ratio of negative to positive. So there's all of this thing happening in the world. We pick up an infinitesimal fraction of it. And then of which we pick up, we focus on the negative. Negativity bias is a very well-studied phenomenon.
I think that you nailed that, because here's my example is like, I've got a lot of important things going on. And for about 2 days straight, I was obsessed with the person. I cleared out my parking spot, and then they parked in it. And then when they left, they put lawn chairs in it to save it. And the injustice of that became a full-time job that I obsessed over for 2 days.
You should roll your window and yell at them. I'm telling you, it will help for a few moments.
But it's so interesting that he's saying that, like, you're taking in all of this stimuli, and I know how to prioritize, but I'm clearly surviving because I'm so obsessed with the person who doesn't know how to operate by community standards and is reserving my parking spot that I spent hours and cash to clear. That's ridiculous. But I think that's what's interesting too, Jon, is that then we start the ruminating and the perseverating. And so then it even gets worse because I'm beating myself up for being a ridiculous survivalist.
Yeah. And the most difficult part about that, Katy, is that the person who left the lawn chairs there, they're not even thinking about it. So you're just doing all of this to yourself. Whereas with agency, right? And often, so I look at agency. Let's kind of define it first. Agency for me is the capacity to make intentional choices supported by the belief that those choices matter and have an impact in the world. So when you see your neighbor or whoever it was that left those lawn chairs there, what are your choices, Katy?
Well, my first choice was, Katy, it doesn't matter. It was my first choice. And then it clearly mattered because I thought about it obsessively for 2 days. So my choices were, I could have moved the lawn chairs. I think the choices, I could have left a note that said, this isn't fair, or I could have said, this just doesn't matter. This isn't part of the big picture, and move on. Those were the three things that immediately came to mind.
So look at all the choices that you have right now. But you said, when I first experienced this, I felt like I didn't have a choice. And that's a very common experience. So one way to notice when we're in survival mode is when we feel like we don't have a choice. And by the way, let's make a little parenthesis here and acknowledge that some people actually don't have choices. Right. Mm-hmm. There are systemic issues in the world that we live in. Mm-hmm. If you're in a war zone, you may actually not have agency, may not be accessible to you because of systemic choices. Right. Now, for most of us, and I suspect for many of the folks listening to this podcast, choices are available. And by the way, one of my, I'm going to call him my teacher, even though I've never met him because he died. But one of my teachers is Viktor Frankl, and he went through a harrowing experience in the Nazi concentration camps. And even as he was going through probably the most dehumanizing thing that somebody in our species could experience, he said, even in the worst of circumstances, we have the choice to pick our own attitude, to decide how we confront the situation. So if we believe in Viktor Frankl's perspective, then we can see a choice almost anywhere.
And is that truly what agency is, Jon? Is that choice?
Yeah. And so one of the things that I suggest is that agency is a skill that we can develop. It's not something that it's God-given to us. I don't know why I brought God into the conversation. That will take us down a rabbit hole. But it may be. For some people, it may be. What I believe is that agency is a skill, and you can develop it. Now, what does that mean? If it's a skill, first of all, the first thing that it means is that you can practice it. And as I was doing the research on agency, there were three things that kept coming up as to how we develop our agency. And I summarized them in an acronym, AIR, like the air we breathe. That's awareness, inquiry, and reframing. So that's number one. And we'll go into in a second, but I just want to make another point. If it's a skill that we can develop, it means that we can have less agency or more agency. It lives on a continuum. And what that means is that really low agency is what you experienced, Katy, in the moment that you saw the lawns there. It's very low agency. You're like, there's nothing I can do here, right? You ruminate and you get angry and you say whatever that looks like. And by the way, Katy, we all experience that. So you're in good company. You're in really good company. And then higher agency would be, okay, so right now I can take those chairs and throw them in the garbage. Or do nothing, just walk away. So there's only two choices, a black and white world or black or white world. That would be a little bit of higher agency. Really high agency is what you just did a few minutes ago when you said, well, I could have done this and I could have done that and I could have. So now you're tapping into your prefrontal cortex. You're actually tapping into your executive center and trying to break down the problem and try and figure out what are the options that are available to me. And that, based on what we see in history, is one of the most powerful capacities that humans have developed, and it's what separates us from most of the other species in this planet.
And Jon, that's super clear. And I'm wondering, and I think kind of the example I want to give is a lot of times when I have these, what I would define as kind of ridiculous thoughts or spending energy on something that's in the grand scheme of life not that important, then I go into kind of that shame spiral or that beating up spiral. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're throwing a hissy fit and you're spending energy on this. And there are people in war zones, and there are people who are scared they might be deported. And there's people, who don't make a fair wage. And there's people who have food insecurity. Excuse my language. You dumb bitch. Why are you worried about somebody taking your parking spot? Does that go to the R of air that I need to go and reframe? How would you suggest, what would your advice be when somebody, that might be trying to avoid having agency. It's being, again, in that kind of red zone and kind of panic to where I'm not using my prefrontal cortex. But how would you advise someone in that case?
Jon, let me stop you there. We're going to take a quick break. Our guest this week is Jon Rosenberg, author of A Guide to Thriving, the science behind breaking your old patterns, reclaiming your agency, and finding your meaning. We will answer that question on the other side of this break. We'll be right back.
You've been listening to Wrong Way Forward, where bad advice goes to die and then gets resurrected just so we can roast it again.
If you're enjoying the chaos, hit like and subscribe and come back every Thursday for new episodes.
Have a new topic or some disastrously bad advice you want to dissect? Email wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com. Include your contact info.
Now back to Wrong Way Forward.
Roasting the worst advice ever. Welcome back to the Katy and Justin podcast.
Hi, and we're back with Jon Rosenberg, who's written a book about thriving, moving from survival mode. And I wanted to play Jon a clip because I saw this, and I feel like this is a lot of what I'm hearing from my friends. So I do need Jon to give me advice about how to get out of this kind of ruminating spiral and beating myself up. But I would love for him to hear this because this is very common in this time of year. And I would say in the 50-year-old women group that I'm in, I'm hearing this a lot. So I would love to get some advice about how as a friend you can help people get out of the survival mode. So Justin, if you can play that clip.
Depressed. I just feel like I'm in a thick, dark fog and everyone disappoints me and nothing works out. And what's the point of anything anyway? And before you ask, it's not because I'm not sleeping, okay? Because I'm getting 14 hours of sleep a night.
So that was Julia Louis-Dreyfus in Veep talking about, I think, something we're all feeling. I mean, I go to bed at 7:30. I get plenty of sleep, and I'm going through the same thing. So take it from there, Jon.
Well, Katy, we were talking a little bit about the reframing here.
Yeah.
So would you be open to doing a little exercise and trying to play it out in real time? I don't know where this is going to go,
Yes,
but
always, yes.
okay. So what is the situation here for you?
I think the situation is when I do get caught up in these small, inconsequential things, I then go into a spiral of you should be grateful. You are privileged. You actually do have a lot of options, just by your experiences, your education, your, financial stability. How dare you? How dare you spend time on this? This is ridiculous. And then I go into that kind of shame spiral, which I think again reduces my agency because I'm in that kind of fight or flight mode.
So it's interesting because you brought up a really powerful emotion. So let's try and first bring some awareness to what's happening to it. And you're already showing it because you're naming the emotion, which in this case is shame. So can I ask you, Katy, how does that shame manifest itself? As you're telling me this story, how does it feel in your body, somatically speaking?
I would say shoulders down, trying to kind of close myself off. It feels, maybe like a mild nausea, like a discomfort in my body.
Okay, so there's discomfort, shoulders down, mild nausea, you feel pain. So now that we've brought awareness to the emotion, let's work with is it okay with you if we work with the emotion a little bit?
Yeah, 100%.
So
This is fantastic, getting Katy on a therapy couch. Sign me up.
So if you could talk to that shame, that nausea and that shoulder slump and that feeling that you're having, if you could talk to it, what do you think it would say to you?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind would be like, you're not a selfish person. You made a $500 donation to, Minnesota Immigrant Rights Justice. I'm from Mississippi, and some asshole burned down a synagogue, and I donated $500 to that. So I'm like, you're doing what you can. It's not all your responsibility, and then probably my coaching voice would come in and be like, if you had a friend who told you this, how would you treat them? Why can't you give yourself grace and empathy? I don't know if that's helpful.
Okay. So if you had a friend that came to you and said the exact same thing, what would you tell them? If they said, "Hey, I go into this shame spiral because I'm having a difficult situation. I'm comparing myself to all these people who are suffering, and I realize that I've got it pretty good." What would you say to a friend if they came and told you this?
Maybe what I would try to do is to get them into a good place. So let's talk about what you're grateful for. Let's talk about what makes you happy. Let's talk about maybe going back to what you said, agency. Like, what are the actions you can take to potentially reduce that shame? Maybe going back to where do you think that shame comes from?
Okay, and that's useful. Now, if you were, that's useful because it would help them see a different way. Now, I'm curious if you wanted to validate the way that they're feeling in that moment when they come to you with this problem, what would you say to them?
If I wanted to validate, I think I would say, I understand it's really heavy what's happening there, and it feels as though, one drop, is not going to make enough of a ripple effect to change. And so you do feel a little bit handicapped or, and not able to kind of fully move the needle. Like your impact is so small that it doesn't make a dent. And so I understand how that feels. That wasn't a very good job of validating. Probably feel worse.
I think it was a very good job, especially because you're saying, I understand. Yeah. This is difficult. You can't solve all the problems in the world, even though you want to do that, right?
Right.
So with that in mind, I'm curious. Now we're going to go into the reframing. So we did some awareness, then we inquired a little bit. So what do you think this shame is doing for you? What is it telling you?
I think that's a fantastic question. What is it telling me? I can tell you what it's doing to me. It's making me feel not great. And I intellectually know, and again, we know there's a difference between what you know and doing something about it and the behavior, but I know it's not healthy for me. I'm not sure, but I don't think it's doing me any favors, definitely.
Okay. If you had to offer some compassion to that shame, it's coming with this really icky feeling. And by the way, shame is one of the most icky. So I really appreciate you doing this, Katy, because shame is a difficult emotion to work with.
Yeah, it is. And Justin and I we're both raised as Catholics, so we have a lot of shame.
Yes.
Yeah, I hear that. Hey, I'm raised as Jewish, and shame is a pretty universal emotion. But
Yeah.
so if and I know shame, it's a sucky emotion, and we know we don't love it. Mm-hmm. If you had to be compassionate towards that shame and try and see what is the one tiny little 1% good thing that shame may be bringing you.
Well, I think it shows that I'm an empathetic person, and that
that you care.
Yes, that I care more about.
And how did that
myself.
caring manifest?
In donations.
There. So,
Money.
but you understand the reframe here is that the shame is telling you that you care about something, that something is important to you. And this shame is so powerful that it actually helped you write a check for $500 to a synagogue that burnt out, which is a really powerful action that you're taking. Whether people think it's going to change the world and rebuild the synagogue with a $500, that's irrelevant.
Right.
The reframe here is that the shame is giving you the gift of knowing what matters to you and what your values are. So in that case, shame no longer becomes only the thing that makes you feel nauseous in your shoulders, and it also becomes a guide to telling you what matters to you and what your values are. And I think it's really powerful that this shame is coming up for you, because somebody who doesn't feel that shame may not make a donation. Somebody who doesn't feel that shame may not use space in their podcast to talk about it and for other people to relate to what you're doing.
And that's a good point, John. What are the takeaways in our few minutes we have left for people who may be in a rut, et cetera? You're talking about reframing, error, et cetera. Give us some big takeaways that anyone in a rut can sort of use in their own life to make a change.
I think the first one and the biggest one, and this one is for you, Katy, is that your actions in talking about this shame, in writing a check, in bringing this awareness into this, will ripple. They will ripple, because the people who know that you wrote this check or and so thriving begets thriving. And by the way, there's lots of research around this.
Yes.
When our well-being improves, the well-being of people around us improves. Love that. And that's a really, really powerful takeaway. Probably the best way to thrive is helping other people thrive.
Yeah, I love that, because emotional contagion is real. And you know what I also loved is that you wrote in your book is the journey from surviving to thriving is not linear. And I think that's super helpful too, to know that it doesn't look like this, that it can ebb and flow. And so I think even just for me, resonating with that is to knowing, it's not going to be kind of a consistent kind of upward motion. That was very helpful to me to always remember too. That was a good one.
So we've been trained in our society to think that things are linear and that they grow forever. This is the big difference. Thriving is not the same as success. And I think that's a really important point to make. Success, as we define it in our society, is made up mainly of money, status, and power. Mm-hmm. And money, status, and powers are metrics, are KPIs that you can continue growing to infinite and beyond. And that's great. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with success. I want success just as much as the next person.
Yes.
Thriving is a little bit different, because thriving is about having agency over your own life. It's about finding meaning, coherence, the why behind what we do things. And it's about connection. And it could be connection to yourself. It could be connection to others, social connection. It could be connection to nature or to animals, or connection to the transcendent, to God, or whatever it is that you believe in. So what I'm arguing is that a lot of times we're trading our thriving for success. It's not always a trade-off, but a lot of us are willing to say, here, take my thriving, take my agency, take my social connection, take my meaning, and give me more money, more status, and more power. And that trade is impacting our well-being. By all metrics, we are living in the golden age of humanity. We've never had so much access to water, to education, to technology, to transportation, we are in the golden age of humanity. The only metric in which we're suffering, and that's over the past decade and a half, is mental health. There's a mental health Now, this could be one, because we're measuring it more now than before. We don't know the causality. It's just a correlation. But I think it's important to consider that. So maybe if we start trading a little bit of our success for some thriving, and we say, here, take my money, take my status, take my power, and give me some agency, some meaning, and some connection, that could be a really powerful way to go through life.
So I love that. This has been absolutely amazing, Jon. Justin, can you give away a little bit of your success, power, and money for thriving?
Oh gosh, I would need at least an hour with Jon before I could commit to that. I really thrive on power, success, and money.
I know we need to do a values card sort with Justin. It would be like fame, power, money.
Jon, and most of us do, Justin. Most of us do.
Let me ask you this. What's the one thing someone can do today to make their life better? In our minute remaining.
I think anything that you can do to develop your agency will go a very long way. Just to bring some awareness to what you're experiencing, to inquire and get really curious about it with a friend, with a coach, with a journal, whatever works for you. And if you can find a reframe, that can be incredibly powerful and open the door to much more agency.
Well, thank you, Jon. Our guest today was Jon Rosenberg, author of A Guide to Thriving. Again, you can find this at Amazon, your local bookstore. We really appreciate it. We will have you back again. We didn't get enough time with you today. And like I said, next time what we're going to do is bring some hot topics of things we've discussed on the show and get your take on them. We'll have you back again. Jon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jon.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Thanks for streaming Wrong Way Forward, the weekly reminder that advice is usually free for a reason. We call out bad advice wherever it hides: boardrooms, break rooms, and even book clubs.
Enjoying this dumpster fire? Like, subscribe, and check back every Thursday for new episodes. Want us to roast your favorite piece of nonsense? Email us at wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to include your contact info. We're not psychic, just judgmental. And now, back to Wrong Way Forward.
Roasting the worst advice ever. Welcome back to the Katy and Justin.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. We just had joining us author Jon Rosenberg and discussing his book, A Guide to Thriving. And Katy, he really had some insight into you. And like he said, you were vulnerable. What did you think about it?
I mean, I thought it was great. I think it's so interesting. It's like you coach people, and it's so interesting. You could do that for other people, but you can't do it for yourself. It's like the cobbler's kid has no shoes, right? But I thought he was so articulate. He really broke it down and very quickly. And I love the idea of kind of like, where's the place to start to kind of have agency? And it was really kind of crazy. Y'all know in this new year, I'm not really on social media on my phone, but I check social media once in a while on my laptop. And I took a snapshot of this. I thought this was so interesting. My cousin Betsy down in Georgia posted this. And yesterday was Ash Wednesday. And so for us kind of, Catholics, we go get the ashes. And then, Justin, we were raised to give something up.
Right.
And I remember being a kid, and in Sunday school, we had a chart. And whatever you decided to give up or something you actively did, every week you did it, you got a star. And I think I was like in second grade, and I said I would take out the trash. And I didn't do it one week, and I made my mom get me to Sunday school earlier. I erased it, changed it to something I had done so I could get the star. Because by damn it, I'm competitive, and I wasn't going to not get a star, but that was a double negative. And I also wasn't going to lie because that was a sin. So, but I really love the idea, and for anybody who's kind of doing the Lent thing, and lots of people are, I have a friend who's giving up social media, there's certain people who are like giving up meat or, trying to give up gossip. I liked this, which was something that she mentioned. And I think this is an idea towards agency, what Jon was talking about. It's, it's what you should give up, but really what you can do. So give up harsh words, use generous ones. So I like that idea, use generous ones. Give up unhappiness, take up gratitude. Give up anger, take up gentleness and patience. Give up pessimism, take up hope and optimism. give up complaining, value what you have. And so it just keeps going on, give up sorrow and bitterness, fill your heart with joy. And I think all of those positive emotions make me think of like, those are the things you do when you're thriving.
100%. When I went to church yesterday for Ash Wednesday, and I was thinking the same thing, like the idea of giving something up has such a negative connotation to me. I decided I want to take something on.
Okay,
And so
what are you
like
taking on?
I'm taking on, John calls it the transcendence. Oprah calls it the power of awe. I'm taking on the idea that every hour, I want to be conscious of something I see in the world that gives me awe, whether it's a ray of sunlight. Okay, I didn't expect that reaction.
You had me until you said a ray of sunlight.
Well, something that's just like, what a beautiful thing that exists in
Yes.
our world. A flower, things that I just walk by. But I want to be inspired by awe, and awe can come in all sorts of. I find awe in my dogs. I find awe in my husband, and so it's just reconnecting with that. That's what I want to take on.
I
from
love
us.
that. And I've heard this twist of like you wake up every day and you say, what's the best thing that's going to happen to me today?
Yeah,
And what happens is it changes your viewpoint because you look out and you see the sunset and you're like, I wonder if that's the best thing. And then it's
Yeah.
like you order a BLT and you get an extra side pickle and you're like, oh my gosh, is this the best thing? And so you are starting, like you said, to see the beauty in everyday small things, which would be a flip for me who's obsessing over the negative small things. I would love to spend my energy in awe than I would in that asshole across the street who took my parking spot.
or the garbage man who pulled out in front of me. And I was so mad at myself. I was on the phone with Josh having a lovely conversation, and he's like, "What is happening?" And I'm like, "Sorry." And then I was just mad at myself. Yes. So anyway,
So Justin, let's do a thriving check-in.
I love it.
Like maybe, in a few weeks, let's see if both of us are thriving better, if we are, giving ourselves awareness, inquiry, reframing, we're building up that agency muscle in us. Let's kind of challenge each
that.
other to do that.
That sounds great. So let us know your thriving, surviving stories. You can email us at wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com. Of course, our text line is always open, 720-251-4450. We look forward to hearing from you. And as always, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next week on Wrong Way Forward. All right, that's a wrap on this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. Remember, the only thing worse than taking bad advice is giving it.
If you've liked what you've heard, like, subscribe, or follow us wherever you stream podcasts. And if you've got a topic or need some advice we'll probably regret giving, email us at wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward.